losers, I'm Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with an idea that I had after I read the book, where is it? After I read Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. I had an idea to talk about some haunted house books because this focuses on a haunted house in this book and I thought it was really fantastic. So I gathered together a pile of books that I've read and that I would recommend for various reasons, whether I thought that they were written really great, like the plot was really great, or they were a fun take on a haunted house that's not like a traditional house. And I'd like to share those with you today. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than my other like tropes and horror videos that I've done in the past. I used to really love doing that and I still would like to do that. I just, I don't have the time. Well, it's not that it's kind of a time issue, but also like if I only have a limited amount of time, I don't know if I want to pick up books just because they fit into a trope for me to read to make a video. So I have done tropes and horror videos on haunted houses before. I will leave a link to those in my description, but this is going to be a little bit different. I've done one on haunted houses and one also on like real hauntings, which are fun in a different way, I suppose. So watch those if you'd like after this. But these are a little bit different than like a traditional haunted house story. And I will tell you why, starting with Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This is told with 3 points of view. We have Alice, who is a trans woman, and also Isla, who used to be her friend. You know that something happened that caused this rift and it was pretty awful, it seems. Like they aren't just friends who had a falling out at this point, you know what I mean? And then the third POV is from the house itself. It's called Albion. Albion. That sounds familiar too though. What is that? Anyway, this is Albion, and the house itself is sort of a character in this book, which I really enjoyed. And I think that's really what made this stand out to me. It is a book with great writing and really interesting prose, but I think the thing that really drew me in was the house itself and finding out how it came to be the way it is and stuff like that. So that was a really standout sort of haunted house book for me, and I would definitely recommend this. Next is Within These Walls by Ania Ahlborn. This book I read quite some time ago, but it's one that has really stuck with me. I think when I think about this, I think of the cult aspect to this. This is about a true crime writer who is living in the house where an infamous cult had resided at one point. And this is a stipulation kind of forced on him by the cult leader. He's like, well, I'll give you my story. I'll give you the scoop if you live in this house. But the thing is that like, it's also kind of a haunted house story because it really revolves around this house and these strange things that happen related to, you know, the cult activity and stuff like that. But, you know, it is the house that's being spooky. So if you like cults and if you like haunted houses, if you like books about people writing books, here you go. Here it is. Next is The Ghost That Ate Us by Daniel Kraus. This is a book I read last year, and this wasn't my favorite book, but I think that what makes this stand out is that it is not a traditional haunted house. It's actually like a haunted fast food place. So there's a really interesting cast of characters because of that. And the way that this is told is like a documentary style. You're following the interviewer who's making this documentary as he's interviewing the people who were involved in this incident in this burger joint, because as it turns out, like something terrible happened here and you don't really know until the very end of the book. So you get these bits and pieces. It's like putting together a puzzle, you know, which I think is really fun. And the way that this was told was really interesting. There are photos in here and you know, just interesting things. So that made it more fun than your typical haunted house book, in my opinion. Not that haunted houses are a thing I don't like, but That's what made it stand out to me. Then is a book that I read this year. This is Just Like Home by Sarah Gailey. And despite its charming pink cover, this is a book that is really full of some heavy, heavy topics. In this, we're following Vera, and she is an adult who is coming home to take care of her mother. Her mother is dying. And just this like situation in itself is very uncomfortable for Vera, not just because of the death of her mother, but because she's never ever had a good relationship with her mother. And her mother also is still living in the house where Vera grew up, a house where her father committed a series of murders in their basement. So there's a lot to unpack there for sure. And this is a dual timeline book, which maybe I'll have to do another video on, because this is something that I'm finding I really, really enjoy in books. So we are following Vera as an adult taking care of her dying mother, and also with Vera as a child as she's growing up, this relationship with her father, who she really, really loved and still like loves despite what he did. And we're, you know, learning about this house that he built lovingly. And this house does play a big role in the story, which again is what I think stands out to me. And as you put it together, it becomes really like this strange almost love story. It's really an interesting book, and I think this will probably be like on my list of very favorites at the end of this year. It was so stellar. I can't recommend it enough. This one was so excellent. Next on my list is Remains by Andrew Cull. This is a book I didn't super love, but it had really great gruesome imagery, and it is a story that's like so heavily steeped in grief, which is a theme I do really love in horror. This is about a woman named Lucy, and she is compelled to go back to this abandoned house where her son was killed some time ago. She's supposed to be kind of in recovery from these habits she has, such as obsessing over her young son's death to the point where she feels the need to be where he was killed. So there's this aspect of her kind of spiraling downward. She's seeing these things in this house. Altogether, it's just this really like heavy feeling of grief in this haunted house, this abandoned house, where she feels like she's seeing like the ghost of her son almost. But it does get very sad and very creepy. And of course, it involves the death of a child. So like with all of these, make sure you're reading responsibly, checking for any content warnings you might need. And on to my last book here. This is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. Another book I didn't entirely love, but one that like people still comment on like my full review of, talking about how much they like it. So I think it's kind of 50-50 split whether you love it or didn't care for it so much. So when I say that I didn't love this, that's not to say that you won't. And what I liked about this was the setting for sure. This is totally a haunted house book, but it is a haunted house book that takes place on an abandoned space liner. It's kind of like a cruise ship in space, supposed to be modeled after like the Titanic. In some ways, I think they talk about it like taking like the largest, oh, I can't remember, maybe I'm wrong, but it was on its maiden journey through space, because in this book, like, people are just in space now, you know what I mean? It's not like some crazy thing that people are in space on this luxury liner or anything like that. But our main character is part of this repair crew. They get like the distress signal from the ship, and they find it and they're like, what is this? And then someone's like, that can't be, is it? And it is. It's the ship that disappeared 20 years ago on its maiden voyage, and they open her up and it's like everyone disappeared mid life, you know what I mean? Like there's half-eaten objects. There's, you know, people were doing things when they disappeared somehow. Just like this strange thing. There's no outward sign of like disaster or anything, so it's really confusing why there are no people on this ship, and like how did it just turn up like this, and how did we find it? And it gets into that, of course, but I think, like I said, what I thought was most interesting was that this was a haunted house book set in space, and the haunted house was a mysterious luxury space liner thing. So if you're super into sci-fi, if you're into sci-fi horror, if you're into things set in outer space, I would definitely recommend you pick this up. See if you like it. So those are some of my sort of out of the box haunted house books that I would recommend for one reason or another. I'd love to know if you have any other haunted house recommendations. This is a trope that I do enjoy. Although I do enjoy it more, I think, when there is something special thrown in, you know, like this assorted set of books. So I'd love to know if you've read any of these, what you thought about them, if you liked them, if you hated them, if you have any recommendations. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out my Pango, my social media, all my links. That's it. Thank you. I will see you later. Goodbye.